Hi everyone, Tanya Hertz here. We are going to now talk a little bit about this budget activity, the budget proposal for the assignment, for the financial planning assignment this week. And if you go ahead and log into your Canvas and open up the budget activity, you can see here it takes you step by step through creating a budget proposal. So you'll open up that assignment there, and the first step is to use the budget template to create a business budget proposal. So click on that template there. Once you click on it here, you'll then want to click on the actual budget there, and you'll need to make a copy and then save that copy, because the version that you have is it's a view only version, so you can't make changes, you can't modify it. You actually have to open it up and then make your own. Oops, not opening right there. It's a little slow. I have one open right there. You have to make your own copy. So let's say we had it open here. You can do like this, file, make a copy. It's probably the easiest way to do it. And so this one could be the name of our business. Let's say it's For Joy for Home. Joy Home, our tamale business. Budget proposal. So you have to give it a new name so that you can actually go in there and make changes yourself, right? Make changes yourself. So hopefully this will work so we can get in there. And while that one's opening, I'll show you some of these tabs at the bottom, because I think you might need to know what they mean. So there are several tabs here on the bottom. If you click on these little lines over here, you can see all of the different sheets, what the tabs are. And the one that you're going to be editing is the one that says budget template. That's your business budget. That's what we're going to use to determine exactly how much money it's going to take for you to either, number one, start your business, or number two, grow your business in some way. So maybe you ask for the money to expand your operations and to create a new marketing campaign, or to launch a new location, or maybe it's just to start and grow your business. Whatever it is, this is what the budget that we want to see is for. So you will need to create a budget specifically for that. And I gave you some templates of the business budgets or the expenses for a yearly startup, right? And then you'll also want to have a budget created. Oh, I don't know why I just did that there. Oops. You'll also want to have a budget created for your or expense sheet budget created for your monthly operating expenses. So again, the one that you'll be using for this budget assignment, let's just say we're going to do it for the startup. We're going to do it for the startup expenses. So for those startup expenses, a good way to do that is to break things down into categories. So you can use one of these additional business expense samples templates to do that, or you can just put the numbers directly into the business budget template. And I'm sorry, it looks like mine is not working here for my copy, but so I can't actually make changes, but that's okay. I can go through and show you. So if I were the tamale business that we explained as used as a sample before, Joy from Home, who is making her business tamales from her house and now wants to have a legitimate business around that, what I would do is I would actually start by breaking down my business expenses, the expenses to actually start that business, into specific categories. So I have the sample that I made for her here. And if you go here to the yearly business expenses sample, this is the one that I started for her business. And this is what I would use if it was my business to figure out how much money it would take for me to actually launch this legitimate business. And then also I would use this for my yearly taxes, right? And so you start by going in here, changing the name to your first and last name. And then I separated this by some common expenses. I actually just used some of the expenses that I used for my actual taxes when I had my food service business. And And so I separate them by that. So each of these, in this form here, you can see each of these boxes, that's an actual expense category. And then I actually go through that and put specific examples of actual expenses in that category. So remember before when we were first talking about expenses, I said it's really important that you both join them up into categories that make sense to you. It's a good idea also to use categories that you typically would use for your taxes. So professional fees and dues, that's a common expense category. And so I went through and I actually put actual professional association dues or credentials I had to pay things for, alumni dues, association dues. Let's say I had whatever professional membership that I pay yearly to, and business licensing and permits. So if I needed a liquor license, a health inspection, a business permit, dumpster fees, things like this, city level business fees, registration fees, insurance, you have common insurance include things like liability insurance. If you have a home that you're renting, you have to pay renter's insurance. If you have employees, you pay workers' comp insurance. Maybe you have general liability insurance because you don't have other ways of protecting your assets, right? Maybe you don't have an LLC and you still want to make sure that if somebody sues you, you're protected. So you might have those kinds of insurance. Maybe you need to improve or remodel the space, like your home kitchen, or maybe you're building a food truck and you need to do some upgrades to that food truck. You can put that in that category. We also have COVID prevention. Think about everything that you can think of that is associated with operating that business. If you spend the money, take the legitimate deduction. So for COVID prevention, you have to buy some personal protective equipment, maybe extra disinfectants, other supplies to prevent spread of disease. Maybe you want to have a point of sale system that's like an iPad with software that you buy for your or that you pay, I think it's $20 for your point of sale system with Square, or maybe you want a real legitimate point of sale system, or a barcode reader, or a POS that talks to the back of the house. Those would be more expensive. Put all of those there. Kitchen supplies, kitchen equipment, tables, chairs, plates, silverware, and you break them down by specific expenses that go with this. Now, again, this is yearly because this was from a taxes, employee salaries, signs, awnings, marketing, advertising. Maybe you're going to do a charitable food giveaway, and you're going to do a photo competition for that. All of those costs associated with it, you want to put those in there. Uniforms, labels, cooking equipment, cutlery, equipment, advertising, any of your the business cards, your letterhead, your website design, your URL, your your updates. If you pay a student to make social media posts for you once a week, you can put all those expenses in there. Maybe you do some old-fashioned advertising like radio or print ads. Anything, put them all in here, right? Other recurring and operational expenses, yearly food and alcohol costs. This is the one that's going to be really, it's going to be tough to estimate, and it's going to be, especially if you've not worked in the industry before. And so some of the things that I included in here were some of my cost of one recipe or cost of recipe estimate samples. Remember, you need to know how much every single item of food you produce costs, and you need to have a scalable recipe for that. Remember I gave the example of the food business where they were making that lobster BLT, and it was such a big hit. Everybody wanted to buy that sandwich. It was such a delicious sandwich, had this yummy bisque that you dipped it in. And when I asked, how much does it cost you to make this sandwich with the food costs and the food and labor costs, how much does it cost, right, to make this sandwich? They didn't know. And when we finally calculated the cost of producing that sandwich, we found out that they were selling it for $2 less than they were charging for the food. So they were essentially paying people to eat their food, right? Every time somebody bought that sandwich, it cost them $2, more than $2, right? And we know that in the food industry, the margins are razor thin. we don't want our food cost to go above 30%, maybe 35%. The rest of the costs of any item of food should be anything other than food costs. So profit, overhead, labor, etc. So that's not good. That's not good. So you need to calculate, especially for those of you who are providing food, you need to calculate the cost of one recipe. And that means that you need to turn your all of your recipes into scalable recipes. So those of you who've gone to cooking school, you've learned how to do this. For those of you who haven't, it can be a little bit confusing. It can be hard to do. You need to break down your costs all the way down to that the food and labor costs for that one recipe, right? That one recipe. And so that means that you need to convert your measurements into scalable measurements. So that means that if you have things like, maybe you have teaspoons, or you have cups, or gallons, you need to convert that into either metric or some kind of a weight measurement, so that you can scale that recipe, and then you can break it all the way down to the cost for producing one unit. So I did put in here some samples along with some basic conversion calculations. You can use Excel to do those conversions, and then you can, based on the cost that you have for your food, what do I have over here? Based on the cost that you have for, there it is, cost recipe sample for your food, you can break it down and see exactly how much it costs per, per yield. So, so for this example I did for the tamales was both for the cost of the filling and the cost of the, the masa preparada, or the prepared masa. And so you break it down by ingredient, the weight per unit, you break it down into measurable units that you can scale, like I said, the scalable units, and then break that down by the recipe yield. So this particular recipe yield gives us 60 tamales. So we first calculate the, you put the number of whatever that unit is, whether that's cups, tablespoons, teaspoons, pounds, or ounces, and then the cost per that recipe item. So and by that I mean, but to make for that entire full recipe. So if it costs you, what do we have here for the tamale masa recipe? The masa itself is $2.99 a pound, right? And that gives us 60. So we add up the cost for each of the ingredients separately, then we divide that by the yield per recipe to give us the cost of one recipe. So we know that the tamale filling in our tamale recipes is only actually about 15 cents per tamale, and about $9 for the masa for a 60 batch. Remember, this is just food cost. Oopsie, just food cost. And then the additional ingredients in there, we pull that over. We have the total, masa filling was $9.09 for the whole recipe. For pork butt, we needed about 7.5 pounds, and at $3.99 a pound, so it's about $30 for that entire recipe. The total cost of this recipe with the masa and the filling is about $75 for 60 tamales, so that we know that our food cost is about $1.21. We have to know what our break even is in terms of food costs, in terms of total cost of goods sold, how much does it cost to produce and sell that one tamale, and then finally we can take those numbers then and actually know how much we should price our products for, because we'll go back to pricing here in a little bit, but one of the first places you start with pricing, you always start with the cost plus pricing. So you need to know what your cost is to make it, plus all of the plus the margin or the profit, so that you can then actually make money. That's not the only way you price. That should never be the only way you price. You should also look at the other pricing methods, including the competition, with the competition charges, and then also what your customers are willing to pay, which is a little bit more complicated, but you always start with that price, with that cost. So you should know how much it costs to produce each of your different items, and you can use that then to estimate what you are going to be spending on food and food preparation. Now, for your yearly costs or for your budget, the cost of the recipe is not probably where I would start. I would start with actual expenses if you have them, actual actual expenses that you've spent on doing your research, on testing your market, on actually going out there and selling to people, because there is a lot of waste in there, and that's why food costs should only ever be about 30%. Okay, so going back to the yearly expenses, we have costs such as, let's see, yeah, yearly expenses. Do I have that? Let me see here. Yearly expenses. There we go. Yearly expenses sample. Oh, yearly expenses sample right there. And so we also we have our cooking tools, our equipment, our marketing, our uniforms, our label, all these additional costs like any Yelp that we pay or bookkeeping if we pay for an inventory control system. We look at our actual food cost for menu planning. We look at our rent, we look at our utilities. Oh, and I gave you some additional calculations that you can use in here too, if you're using your home for your business. So if you are and for your estimates for startup, we typically use 3 months or 90 days to estimate. So we look at what it's going to cost us for 3 months, because we assume that the first 3 months you may not be making any money. You're going to need to spend this. You're going to need to spend this. So you can look at 3 months of rent. So you take your home rent, and then you multiply that by the percentage of your home that you're actually using for your business, whether that's 50%, 25%, whatever it is, then multiply that by 90 days. And so I just did a little sample here. So if this Joanna paid $3,200 a month for rent, she's using about 25% of her home for her business. For those 3 months, that means that she can write off $2,400, or she's paying $2,400 for 3 months of business rental kitchen. Her utilities for her home bills are about $1,200 a month. Same percentage usage for 3 months gives her about $900. So these numbers, these estimates that we're putting in here, these operational costs, all of these numbers that we're doing in here, we're just using these other forms to kind of calculate everything and to figure out how we're grouping everything. And then we're taking all of those and we're putting them over into our budget sample or our budget template. So you, in your budget template, you want to include the following. You want to include anything that you own. Remember, assets are things that you own. So if you own the land, not if you rent it, but if you own the land, if you own the building, you'll want to put the value of that here. I'm assuming that most of you, your business does not own. Oh, and I should say this too. If you personally own the land, but your business does not own the land, you don't include that, right? Unless the type of business ownership is a personal ownership, like a sole proprietorship. Every other one, you wouldn't include it, right? The business has to own it, owned by the business. Any furniture that you have owned by the business, any equipment that you've already bought, we need to know ones that you've already bought so that we can have your non-current assets. So non-current means assets that have worth for over a year, right? So, and then we look at our current assets, our assets like any grants that you might be getting, any money that you already have in the bank from selling your products or services. So I want you for this assignment to include the San Diego food grant, right? The Get Cooking grant, the food justice grant. The maximum amount that you can get is $7,500. In order to get the maximum amount, we need to see that you have over that amount in actual expenses to either start your business, so the startup expenses, or if you are expanding your business as part of the grant, if that's what you asked for. Okay, so we need you put this in here if you're thinking, oh no, I'm only going to need like $5,000 or $2,000, whatever. I don't know if you want to put that. Yeah. Okay. And then any income that you have right now from the business, any income in the bank, and any income in cash that you have from the business, and any inventory that you already bought. So how is inventory different than equipment, right? Equipment is something that doesn't get used up when you use it. So a supply or inventory gets used up when you use it. So food supplies, other things that get used up, those are inventory or supplies, not equipment, right? Okay, so those, you add those all up and then you take your total non-current assets, and then you take your total current assets, add those together for your total assets of, here we have an example, 17,500. Now, we then need to deduct our expenses from our assets. And this is where it's really important that you calculate and you add every single expense that it's going to take for you to start your business. And again, if there's any variable expenses or recurring expenses, you can estimate about, like I said, about 3 months for startup expenses. So make sure that you estimate all of your business licenses, all of your permits. For Joanna's business, it was only about $84 in licensing and permits, and that's pretty normal in San Diego. It doesn't cost that much. In professional fees and dues, she had about $50 that she estimated. And you can see we put the overall categories up here, right? Not the detailed expenses. So let me go back over here. So in Joanna's budget sample, she had $84 in business licenses and permits. In her sheet over here, that was business license and permits. She had a $35 San Diego business permit fee, which is $35. And then she had another $49 registration fee because it was in the city of San Diego. And so we just take the total. So we're just taking the big overall categories. You don't need to give all of the details of how you got to those categories in the actual budget. But you do want to include everything that you have so that we can see that you have all these expenses. You want to show all of those expenses so that you can get the maximum amount possible, because as a small business owner, you want to take advantage of it, right? So we took tables, chairs, plates, silverware, again, 3 month supply. We're going to estimate 3 month supply. That was about $5,000. Improvements in remodeling. So she's adding a food warmer container to her delivery van, and she's doing some other improvements on her home kitchen. So that gave her about $6,000 there. And all those expenses, we put them over here, right? She had her delivery van modifications were about $2,500. She had structural changes. She had, what else did she had? She had a food warmer to it. She did upgrades to home kitchen, which about $2,300. And so we need to see all of those expenses, what those expenses are, so that you can get the most possible. And again, for your taxes, so that you can write off every single expense possible. Her point of sale system, she bought a new iPad and it cost her $20 to put Square software on it. Large appliances, about $3,600 in stoves and things like this. Her food and alcohol costs were only about $845, which was really low. It's because she has not yet opened her business. That was just for like testing and figuring out recipes and things like this, which seems really low to me, but that's what she estimated. Her cooking tools there, her insurance is only that. Her marketing and advertising, about $350. Now her recurring and operational expenses, you do want to explain any costs that you have there that aren't clear. So here, it was her rent and her utilities, right? And you get to take a portion of it, of the home that she's using, and include those expenses. So she had a total net expenses of about $23,000, which was more rather than what she currently has in her assets, about $17,000. And so in this example, she would absolutely be eligible for the for the entire amount in the food grant, right? Because she did a good job of estimating all of those expenses out. Now, if your total costs are less than your total assets, that would mean that you're already cash flow positive. You should be already making money. A negative number tells us that, number one, you're going to need more money to start the business, or you're going to need to maybe reduce your expenses a little bit to get to that place. In reality though, maybe some of these expenses you've already paid for, you've already bought, and so you don't need to have the cash on hand. And that's why it's so important that you always keep track of your cash flow separately from your actual operating expenses and budgets and things like this, right? So this is a really good example, because you can see that she has enough. It looks like she has enough money, pretty close to enough money to start this actual business. Some of the expenses she already paid, she had to pay them anyways to live, right? Because they're her home expenses and things like this. And because her costs are more than her assets, she's going to be able to be eligible for that entire amount in that grant. So of $7,500, right? So you always want to make sure that you have that in there, have that San Diego Food Justice grant Again, the total possible is 7,500. If you don't think you're going to need that much, then don't put that much. But if we do see that your costs are less than your assets, then we aren't able to give you the total amount. So if you have enough in assets to cover the costs, then you're not eligible for the grant from the state of California. So just make sure that you do that right. Okay. Cool. And so when you're done with this, you're going to take your budget. Just the budget is what we need to see. As long as you have enough explanation in there, you can then upload the sample of this budget into the Canvas, and then you're done with the assignment. So hope that was helpful for you. And we are meeting in person on Friday to help everybody who needs help with this. So take advantage of those times that we can meet so that you can get help with your budgets. So have a good one, everybody. Take care. I hope to see most of you on Friday.